All right, here we go. A new example. So this example I got from the Census Bureau of the United States. And I don't know if you remember, we talked about what a census is way back in the beginning of class. When you collect a sample from a population, if you happen to have the whole population, that sample is then called a census because it's no longer a sample, it's everybody. Okay. And the Census Bureau actually does small samples all the time. Every day they're collecting new data from smaller samples of people in the US. How many people in the US? There's over 300 million people in the United States right now. And sometimes their samples are as large as hundreds of thousands of people. Sometimes there may be tens of thousands or thousands of people. Sometimes they even do samples of millions of people. So they're always collecting data for various reasons to help move things along in our economy and in our social networks. So real median, notice they're using median instead of mean here. Typically, we're not going to play with medians. We're going to play with means, but we're just going to go with this because that was the data I found. Was 800,000 in 2023. That was a 4% increase from the 2022 estimate, which was 77,000. This is the first statistically significant annual increase in real household income. When they use the word real in there, that means they take into account inflation with respect to the change in income. So inflation is the average increase in cost of things that we purchase throughout a given year, month, week, quarter, and so on. So here they're saying the median is about $80,610 for the household income. So that's right in the middle. Now that's not an individual's income. That's the individual, that's the median of a household. And some households have a lot of people in them earning incomes. Some houses only have one, some have two. It just kind of all depends. So this is kind of a complicated number to calculate because they have to identify how many people in every household are making an income and what those incomes are. And I did try to find this data, and this was the place where I found the 1.5 million row data set, which shut down my computer when I tried to put it in Google Sheets. I also tried to give it to Excel. Excel fried too. My computer shut down. Couldn't do it. So remember when I used AI earlier and it did some calculations with a program called Python? Python could do this on my computer. It's a little bit more efficient than, say, a spreadsheet is. But I haven't gotten around to programming Python to make the calculations because I just wanted to kind of confirm how they went about making them. But it's a pretty straightforward thing once you have all that data. I did go to the source in the table, and I'll link this document out in my notes later where I'm getting this from. So that's a point estimate. So based on this sample, we think that in the population, the median household income is about 80,000 in 2023. Okay. Is it exactly that? Answer is no, because this is sample data, not population. Is it close to what's going on in the actual population? Pretty close. What does close mean? How close? That's where we need a margin of error to try and say how close we think it is to the actual population. So I did a little digging in their tables, and I found this from the source that led me to this table 1A. And here's a snippet of table 1A. And notice this row right here says households, all households. In 2023, they sampled 132,200 households. That's a lot. Okay. Based on those households, information about their yearly income, they ended up with this median estimate of 80,000 and a margin of error of 634. Okay, so that estimate of 80,000, it's 80,000 what? Dollars. Just dollars. So guess what the margin of error is also? Dollars. Okay. So I'm going to grab this right here. And the one there meant there's more information further down somewhere in the document. And I'll get to that in a second. So let's steal that right there. Current page. So this is the additional information I dug around and found. So other things to note here, the margin of error, usually we call that ME, is 634. So that would be $634. Based on that, we can create a confidence interval estimate. How do we do that? Well, I'm just going to draw it out here. Right in the middle of my confidence interval is the 80,610. If I add the margin of error to that, then I'm going to get the upper end of the confidence interval. So that's the, I think I can do that one in my head today. There's going to be a 4, a 4, 2, a 1, and an 8. So that's the upper part of my confidence interval estimate. And then on the other side, I got to subtract it. Let's subtract that in my head today. That's another 24 down. So that's going to be what? 7, 9, 9, 8, 6. Somebody with a calculator check. What is 80,610 minus 634? That up 76. That sounds more like it. Yeah. Confirmation. It should be 76, not 86. Yeah. Okay. I already made a little mistake and said there. Does that look right now? Okay, so that's my confidence interval estimate. Now, the confidence interval depends on the confidence level. The higher the confidence level, the wider the interval. The lower the confidence level, the narrower the interval. And the standard is a 95% confidence interval. So if we kept digging in their document, eventually we would see that this confidence interval is based on a 95% confidence level. And I'll talk more about how to interpret the confidence level later, but it helps figure out how wide or narrow the interval should be. So based on the sample size here and the data that they collected, they think the median household income in 2023 was 80,610 with a margin of error of $634. Or we could say we think that the median household income in the US is somewhere between $79,976 and $81,244. That's a relatively narrow range given the size of this income, right? If you make $79,976 a year, aren't you going to say I make about 80,000? And if you make 81,244, you still make about 80,000. Right. So in the ballpark of that number, that's a pretty narrow range. If the confidence interval is too wide, it's not useful. And a confidence interval will be narrow if your sample size is too small. That's usually the problem. Okay. But typically, we're going to go with a 95% confidence level. Next class, we'll play around with what do other confidence levels do. But sample size is another big deal. So confidence level and sample size are the two things that we worry about. And we have a pretty good sample size there. 132,200 households. Now, each of those households has multiple individuals in it. And I think that's where I ended up with that data set that was like the 1.5 million. And some of those households, they couldn't get data from. And they noted that in the sample. So I had, maybe at least 100,000 rows in that data set that just said no information. But I did go and eventually find the raw data from this. And then again, that's blew up my computer. So I'll get back to that later. Questions on what I have here so far? Okay, so sorry about that noise. Where the hell is that coming from? The next